All right, good morning. This open meeting of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee is convening by a video conference pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021 as extended on July 16th, 2022. Excuse me. This meeting is being recorded and all attendees are participating remotely via Zoom as posted on the town's website identifying how the public may join. Please be aware that other people may be able to see you and take care not to share your device's screen. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Please silence all phones and devices. Members of the public wishing to participate in the meeting must use their full name for Zoom access. If full names are not used, people will not be allowed to participate in the discussion. The town reserves the right to remove any member of the public from the meeting who doesn't use their full name or who acts inappropriately. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For items with public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment to those members of the public who have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged by and speak through the chair. If you're not able to participate in the remote meeting, you may also submit comments to the Coastal Resilience Coordinator, Vince Murphy, to be read into the meeting record. His email is vmurphy@nantucket-ma.gov. I am Mary Longacre, Chair of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Gary Beller.
Here.
Sarah Boyce is not joining us today. Peter Brace.
Here.
I don't see Matt Fee. Rachel Freeman. Rachel, get to unmute. Rachel's waving hello.
I'm here.
Thanks, Rachel. Ian Golding.
Yes.
Jen Carberg is expected to join us late. I do not see Christy Kickham. I do not see Joanna Roach and Joe Topham.
Here.
Good morning.
Morning.
All right, staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Vince Murphy.
Here.
And I don't think we have any anticipated speakers for today's agenda, so we will turn to that agenda. Today is September 13th. And the first item on the agenda is approval of minutes from August 9th. We do not have the minutes from August 23rd, so just the 9th. Vince, if you want to put those on the screen. The only note that I have, Vince, if you want to scroll down, I think it's the top of the second page. Maybe the top of the third page. Or it might be the top of a later page. Right there. So item 4. The Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee voted 6-0 to approve this proclamation. That was a moment when Joe had stepped away. So that was why we did not have 7-0 on that vote. So I thought we would note that because he is noted as attending the meeting. We would just put a note there, Joe Topham was not available to vote. Right, and I think there were a few small typos that we can correct. Did anyone else have comments or suggestions for the minutes? If not, we'll take a motion to approve.
So move. Second.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Joe, for the second. Roll call votes. Gary Beller.
Aye.
Peter Brace.
Aye.
Rachel Freeman.
Aye.
Ian Golding.
I abstain as I wasn't present.
Thank you, Ian. And Joe Topham.
Aye.
And Mary Longacre, aye. Okay, next item on the agenda, an update on the CZM grant application from Vince Murphy. I wish the news was better, but at least it's not bad.
Yeah. So I reached out to CZM members on Friday, Patricia Bowie, to understand where they're doing and how they're getting on. They replied and said, in coming weeks, I'm taking that as 1 to 2 weeks. As soon as I have anything for this committee, I'll send it straight on. If I can, Mary, I do have other grant news. So committee members might remember that in, I think, was it April or May, this committee provided, hang on, somebody's coming in at May.
Yeah, I'll watch that. Well, it's doesn't have a name on it.
I thought it was Joanne. I think that's.
Oh, but it's somebody else. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this committee did a letter of support for a SNEP grant. It's Southeast New England FEMA zone grant. What's her name? Leah Hill came and spoke to the committee about it, requested the letter of support. The committee put forward a letter of support. We've been successful. We've gained a grant for that, and this is for works in Sacajah Pond for an oyster reef to create more resilience and protect the road edge, and to have a natural graded edge to the road and have natural habitat to fix the issues that are in that area right by the roadside at Sacajah. So that's positive news. That's valued at something in the region of $150,000. NRD is extremely happy about this.
Great.
Vince, excuse me, Vince, or excuse me, Mary. Can you please repeat how much that grant was for?
I think it's 150,000. If you give me one moment, I will find the email from Patricia. Find the awarding email.
Thank you so much.
No problem. 158,456. 158,000.
Just noting for the record, Joanna Roach has joined us. Joanna, want to give us a quick hello?
Whoops, I should unmute. Hello.
Good morning. Okay, so we'll hope for good news in the coming weeks. Next item on the agenda, continued review and discussion of revisions to the sea level rise recommendation to the select board. There was a new draft in the packet for that. We took we took all of the suggestions from the last meeting and tried to incorporate those, taking off the pictures at the end, putting in some of the information that people had commented about it was inserted in the intent section. And Jen Carberg is joining us momentarily. So hopefully people had a chance to read this. There were some comments on the document as well, if you got to see those. Happy to have further discussion, other suggestions. Also pointing out that I tried to add information to the table that Vince had created to make that a little bit easier for people who aren't familiar with the sea level rise data to interpret. So any comments, suggestions? If there are none, do people think that this is done?
Yes.
Oh, thank you, Peter.
I just think that we can overdo it.
Mhm.
We can split too many hairs, and we're the editors, so we know what this thing is. And there'll be finer points that will be lost on a lot of people. So I just think that it works the way it is.
I had a similar thought. I had visions of eloquence and decided on brevity.
Exactly, and clarity at the same time, so that people get it when they read it on the first read. They don't have to try and figure it out.
Okay. Does anyone want to make a motion to approve this as presented today? And
I'll
send
make
it?
that motion.
Thank you,
I
Peter.
will
Do we have a
second it.
second? Thank you, Joanna, for seconding. Any further discussion? No, roll call vote. Gary Beller,
Aye.
Peter Brace,
Aye.
Rachel Freeman,
Aye.
Ian Golding,
Aye.
Jen Carber,
Aye.
Joanna Roach,
Aye.
Joe Topham,
Aye.
Mary Longacre, aye. Thank you all. Well, it took a lot less time than I thought it would.
Mary,
Yes.
I have
Gary.
a question. So we have this updated recommendation, which
Mhm.
we're going to send to the select board. What is it that we expect the select board to do now that they're going to get this updated recommendation from us?
As they did last time, it is up to them to adopt it, which then makes it a policy statement for the people that we're targeting, the town boards, the town offices, the members of the public who can refer to it as well, all the engineers, architects, and so on. Vince, am I missing anybody in that?
No, you're on the right track. It just, it also provides the new information that wasn't there before. It updates the no information, but also provides the new MCFRM and gives that a public platform at select board so that everybody knows about it.
So in our communication to the select board, shouldn't we be kind of extremely briefly saying, here's the updated recommendation. It basically updates X, Y, and Z, very quickly, so they know what's coming, instead of having to ask them to study this very carefully to figure out what changed from the last time.
So Vince fills out a cover sheet that goes to the select board, and he can indicate on that sheet what the expectation is for them, what their action is, what level of review they might need.
Yep.
Okay.
So that should accomplish that.
So just to get to Gary's point, I'll do that with maybe 2, 3, 4 bullet points showing what the major changes are.
Right. Good.
Okay, so when Vince is ready, the next item on the agenda is an overview of the Falmouth Coastal Resiliency Planning for the Surf Drive area. That is a project that they did that has a website, and he thought that could be a useful model for us to look at for other projects. So he was going to take us through it and give us his thoughts.
Okay. So bear with me one moment. Most CRAC members will remember this one. I'm sorry, just moving stuff around so I can share it properly. We used, so last year when CRAC was involved in the development of the Baxter Road feasibility assessment, there was a lot of discussion at the time, and in other parts of the development of the Coastal Resilience Plan, about using the decision-making tree, the decision-making map that was developed for the Falmouth Surf Drive area. But they've effectively finished their work. They've developed a report, and they've updated and fixed their decision-making tree. It's just something that might be of use to this committee to understand, because it has direct applications for what we might do in certain areas around Nantucket. It could be a lovely format to follow, even though we've already seen this before, but to actually just use it and implement it from a different community, and just everyone be on the same page and have similar ways of moving forward to create consistency between communities. But what they have here is their whole web page with all of the nice information on it, but the story map is the most interesting part. We've seen things like story maps that were developed after the design thinking workshop, but you can go through this in your own time. My favorite part is they use things like the MCFRM. They did a study on it, and I'm trying to, yeah, that's that. This is the instructions, then the overview. Here we go. No. I haven't used this in a week and a half since I put the agenda together. I apologize, everyone. So just go through it. They used MCFRM. It's terrific. I'm trying to find where their decision-making tree is. No, I'm not as prepared as I should have been. I apologize, everyone. So this is the Surf Drive area right here. This is kind of their barrier reach system with a road. I'm sorry, I'm not finding the decision tree that I wanted. Anyway, it's well worth going over.
If you go back to that main page, instead of the community outreach story map, the fourth link down, the recommendation and implementation story map.
Thank you. This is what I want. So there's lots in this. And let this resolve. There we go. The decision tree is close to the end.
But what a lovely website with all
It
of
is.
this information on it.
This is it, finally found it.
Great.
So they had a number of decision-making routes and decision-making policies. The color coding for the lines is up further, sorry. Here it is. So natural resources based, connection themed, protection themed, and managed retreat. Managed retreat is kind of one of the things that I took most from this. And then they also have a preferred path. So they want to do things between natural resources in green and the
Managed
not-
retreat.
managed retreat in blue. So they're effectively at some point going to have to switch from the managed retreat to natural resources protection when they're going to do their retreat planning. That's the whole point of this. They looked at all other options. We did this too for Baxter Road, where we looked at as many options as we could think of, everything from the coastal storm barriers, you know, the 5 modular units, which they did here, but ultimately haven't made part of their preferred options for many of the same reasons. But if this is the kind of thing that could be implemented for, say, Madikit, for the sewer treatment plant, bits of Codfish Park, this is one of those nice devices that's easy for the public to follow, and something that we've already kind of borrowed from, and I'd like to see implemented or used in a further way. So just putting this on the committee's radar.
Great, thank you, Vince. Any comments or questions from committee members?
I think this looks like a great tool to kind of help pull the public along on the thinking. You know, with the CRP, we've got steps with sea level rise and small interventions, you know, the just now interventions versus the later ones. And this looks like a great way to visualize what that process might look like, Vince. I like it. You just got to get someone to do it.
I like that it also demonstrates that there are a number of options, and whether or not they're good options, you know, but they're still, you know, they're still paid tribute to in the presentation. At the same time, it's very clear what the preferred option is.
And I think if we can, if we do this, if we can show projects that are going on right now, not everybody responds well to this graphic you're looking at. You can see it the way maybe Vince sees it or Falmouth sees it. So maybe there's a way that if you, maybe I'm sure there's a way that if you can show each project where it is, then when you hover your cursor over it, a dialog box comes up and has a little, you know, bit of information about it so people see it. This is the Folgers Marsh project. This is the stage that it's at. This is what we're trying to achieve, something like that. But I agree with everything that Jen said and how visualization is so important.
Joanna? Yeah.
Is there even do we even have a worksheet that's tracking any of these projects currently, Vince?
I do.
You do,
I can
But
share
it's
with the
not-
committee as needed.
but it's not a
I've got it for
public.
CRP projects.
Okay,
I'm just tracking where projects are developing and where projects are being active, because we're trying to get as many activated as quickly as possible. We're just not there for most of these yet. Hopefully this will be a different story by the next meeting or the meeting after, when we'll be able to start charting for the downtown flood relief barrier.
Yeah, Joanna?
do you think that we should be taking all of the capital projects that are on the town's list and making our own spreadsheet of which projects impact or overlay coastal resiliency so that we know what they are and that we are familiar with it and we can follow the progress?
That'd be an interesting question for Christy to weigh in on. But I think that communication between departments to bring coastal resilience concerns into the conversation is a very important thing. But yeah, that we should talk to Christy, and it's the beginning of the capital project review season right now, so that is time.
Well,
Rachel?
can I? Oh, sorry. Then-
Rachel, go ahead, and then we'll come back to Joanna.
Thank you, Mary. Vince, I was involved in one meeting that Libby set up that was interdepartmental, and I forget if you were there or not, but I assume you were, that was meant to look at that exact question. You know, how all these tie together and what the coastal resiliency components were. And I don't know, is there a second meeting planned? Where has that gotten to? That committee, I'm not sure what it was called even, but.
So if I can, Mary,
Mhm.
it was called the Coastal Resilience and Sustainability Interdepartmental Working Group. It was it got going in April. I was supposed to do those meetings every quarter. I'm supposed to run those meetings. I sent around a handful of prep ideas for topics and also suggested meeting dates for July, for the first week of July. And that never happened. I couldn't get people to agree to a date. It was July, so it was a problem. I'm going to try and get that going again. Sorry, I tried again for the end of August and that failed for many of the same reasons, as people are just too busy. It is still an active group and it is still an active thing. We just have to find meeting times and work on it and agree on meeting topics.
Thank you, Vince. Back to Joanna.
So I guess my question is, can we add this as a agenda item to our next meeting? Like developing some sort of, for this fall budget session, some sort of way to evaluate projects, know about projects, track projects. I mean, I know some of them like off the top of my head, but we're gonna go into this time where this is gonna become quickly important.
Yeah, I think, Vince, if we can talk to Christie and try and get that set up as a topic on our agenda with his
Sure.
participation, that would be the first step.
Even if he gave us, Vince, a copy of, so here, there's probably a middle step, right? Which is we would need, I think, a copy of all the capital projects that got funded from last year's town meeting and the amounts that they were funded for, right? Because we have to have a starting place. And then we can know which of those projects are going to impact coastal resiliency, because the reality is that most of those projects, even though they just got funded, haven't started yet. And this is where this process, just from my experience on the finance committee, falls apart, is because we don't know exactly when. We know when the projects get funded because we voted, but we don't ever know when the projects get started. And sometimes they can take years from the time we fund them to start.
So what you're saying, Joanna, if I'm understanding correctly, is to review the prior town meeting capital outlays that were voted in.
Yep.
And just determine which of them have a coastal resilience impact, and then try and follow those as
Yes.
they go forward. And I'm supposed potentially provide input for whatever our coastal resilience concerns might be regarding those projects.
Yes.
Okay. We'll figure out a way to move forward on that. And Vince, I'm not sure it's as simple as just reviewing the warrant, but maybe it is. I haven't thought about it.
So me too. I know that once some of these projects started getting put forward from Natural Resources Department of what we're going to try and achieve this year, I made my recommendation to the department director. I don't know where it went after that. So I'm kind of in the same boat.
All right, but I think a good point from Joanna to try and pay attention a little bit proactively rather than wait to hear about something. Okay. So next item on the agenda, if there's no further discussion about the Surf Drive presentation, would be to talk about the design thinking workshop, Just Do It projects. We had said to the select board in our last quarterly report that we would come back with more recommendations about how to move those forward. How do we want to recommend moving those forward? And Vince, do you happen to have a list, or any of the program participants have one that they want to put forward?
I'm just getting the list on screen.
Okay.
Here it is. Share it. Okay, everybody see this? This was the Just Do It summary. So Coastal Resilience Sustainability Interdepartmental Working Group effectively done, but need to get those meetings back underway. Joint staff review of development proposals. This is from 1.6, incorporate as a standing agenda item. Okay. Not sure what to say about that one. Washington Street and Francis Street. This is something that is partly underway with Land Bank to some extent, but there's a larger phased process in that. Pulpus Road and Sacajah Pond. This is something we just got the partial grant for. It's built into that, but that's kind of one of about 3 steps in fixing the Sacajah Road issue. Ames Avenue, Madicat Road, no real movement on that one, have to say. And those are the Just Do It items.
All right, so I think the first 2 we just talked about. Vince, if you can scroll up just a little. Yeah, the working group, I think we can probably say in our reports, which we'll be writing next month to cover July, August, and September, that working group should meet since it hasn't since April. And then we were just talking about review of development proposals, not only by the working group, but also by the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. Rachel, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but Vince, I would love to see how we can incorporate the work that the Land Bank is doing with the town, incorporate the Just Do It component more strongly into the work that we're doing with the town on Washington and Francis Street.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, so the recommendation of the CRP was to raise the level of the road in that area. And we're a number of years away from that. I couldn't even put a guess on it, but 5 or more. I have no idea. I'm guessing. But the work that the Land Bank is doing is terrific. The idea is to provide resilience in the interim while we get to that point, so that there will be less floodwaters come into the area while we get to raise the road. And then even once the road is raised, it is still resilience infrastructure in the dune area between the road edge and the harbour. So it's a wonderful hand-in-hand project, I have to say.
Thank you. Just looking at the screen, move forward the sustainability branding campaign. It says the champion is the public outreach coordinator. Since this was written in March and a new position was approved at town meeting for the shared outreach person between natural resources and health, do you think that this sustainability branding campaign will be assigned to that new position, or do you think it will still be with the public outreach coordinator?
So I don't know, quite simply. The public outreach coordinator, I'm not sure how this is going to work. Is that person going to work under the public outreach manager, who is Florence Cirulo, or is it going to be between NRD and the health department, which was another idea and the original idea? There's some debate on that at the moment, so I don't know yet.
So is there anything that we would want to recommend to the select board for this as an action?
About a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, Florence Cirulo did develop the outlines of the branding for all sustainability efforts. They do need to be refreshed and made more publicly available. It would be one thing that I could say. It covered everything from Stop the Straw right through to coastal resilience, energy efficiency, you name it, anything in between there.
Yeah, so I don't want our committee to get involved in things which are not directly coastal resilience related. So just picking on litter as an example, I see a lot of people use litter pickup and litter prevention as a climate change issue, and I don't see it that way. It's certainly not the top one on my list. But if there's something if there's something that we would like to accomplish through the sustainability branding campaign, that might be an avenue that we could advocate for. Joanna?
So Vince, I'm just a little confused. Did they hire somebody or no?
The position was made available in the town budget, but the position has not even been advertised yet.
Okay, then my second question is, I mean, it's Climate Awareness Month right now. And I don't think that anything has been done to promote that. So can we ask about that? I mean, that seems like the lowest hanging fruit. I mean, they voted, we supported it, the Board of Selectmen supported it, but there's no outreach about it.
Sorry, about
Yeah.
advertising the position or?
No, not the position. In general, the fact that it's Climate Awareness Month.
Right,
Climate
so
Awareness.
there are a number of events happening for Climate Awareness
Yeah.
Month. None are directly sponsored by the town, that is correct. But our recommendations for the Just Do It items will not go to the select board until October or even possibly November.
Okay, so,
So they
fair.
will, yeah,
Too late.
this avenue is not available for September.
Okay, thanks, Mary.
Right, anything further on these items, Vince?
So of the three remaining ones, they're all kind of more infrastructure based. There's the Washington Street and Francis Street. Then there's the Pulpus Road and Sacajapon Pond. So Washington Street and Francis Street, there's some movement on these because Land Bank is starting a project in this area that we can call an early phase of sorts, and something that the town is going to build on. For Pulpus Road and at Sacajapon Pond, we already have a grant underway there. We just had the award for it, so there's movement on that one. What there's no movement on, and the one that kind of bugs me a little bit, because it was one of the ones that was talked most about at the Design Thinking Workshop, was Ames Avenue and Madicott Road, the intersection there, and doing something to protect that. That has had no positive movement. I'd love for the committee to make a recommendation on that one potentially, or try and find a way to help progress that, because, well, we all know the issue we had with Chicago Street and access to the beach there, and the cut that's come in there. You can only imagine that's going to progress westward towards the intersection of Ames Ave and Madicott Road. So I'm worried about that corner. Further down towards Millie's Bridge, we've got other things that we've already done. We did the planting there that Jen and I did together. That project was terrific, and the grass is coming in extremely well. It's going to hold really nicely, but just need to see what else we could do to further support that area and further support the bridge. You know, it's a good resilience project, but it's not an ultimate long-term solution.
Right, Peter, you had your hand up?
Yeah, a couple of meetings ago, we had Bruce Mandel is he part of the Madicott Conservation Association? And I think he was saying, one of the things he was saying is, we're ready to go to help you guys out, and we have ideas. So maybe we might have him at a future meeting and tap him for ideas on how to get the Ames Avenue and Madicott Road project going. And then on Rachel's, on Vince saying that the Land Bank already has projects for the interim that they want to get going on, or they're going on. I'm not sure if I heard that right, but and I'm also not sure whether I'm totally out of it, but shouldn't the Land Bank's plan somehow be woven into the town plan, so that where we have these quick projects, we could have maybe in a different color and a key for it showing that here is a Land Bank project from their plan, which is an appendix, or wherever it is in the plan, showing what they're working on. Does that, any of that ring make sense?
If I can, Mary?
Yeah.
So the Land Bank has taken up this project in the Washington Street and Francis Street area. And it's primarily focusing on their properties and their interests in that area. But one of their key goals, if you don't mind me saying it, Rachel, is to have it as an integrated part and to be compatible with the coastal resilience, the town's coastal resilience plan, and the sea level rise information that's in there. So that was one of the early goals, and what's now integrated into it. It's a developing plan, and I don't know, what is it, like a 1.5 year plan? And I don't know, 4 months, 5 months into it, something like that. Just the research part of it at the moment would be the polite way of putting it.
And
Is
I
that fair,
think
Rachel?
Rachel, if you want to respond, go ahead.
Okay, I think that is fair. I think, Vince, we can have this conversation another time. I just want to make sure that we're working with the town and looking at all the components that the town is considering, you know, and doing our best to understand and know and set up for those, you know, through this project. So I just want to circle back on that and double check that we're completely on the same page, and we know what your long-term goals are and how we can try and set up for them in the near term. So.
Makes sense.
Great. Right. And to Peter's other point, I think we can definitely invite representatives from Mattakit Conservation Association to our next meeting to have a more detailed discussion about what to do in Mattakit. Jen?
Thank you, Mary. Vince, you said it would be helpful if there was push on the Ames Avenue Mattakit Road piece, and I'd just be curious what you see as being helpful, because I agree with you. I think we need to have forward movement on that area pretty quick. I mean, just standing at the parking lot at Chicago Road this weekend and watching it get eroded away with the high surf, we're probably going to lose that corner this winter. And I agree that's going to progress down to Ames Avenue and Mattakit Road. So even if it's just our push of saying we need to take intermediate action, you know, this winter to start stabilization down there so that we can plan for something next spring, if that's the kind of word, I don't know what kind of wording it is that would be helpful coming from us, but I agree. I think we should push on that in the whatever way is appropriate.
Yeah. So one of the things that was envisaged in the CRP for this area was this whole dune restoration in front of the existing buildings, the existing coastal bank effectively, and that it was going to run all the way from just to the east of Chicago Street and pretty much all the way out to Smith's Point beyond the Massachusetts Avenue access point. It was going to be huge. But if you look at the core area where the major concern is, it's kind of like pretty much from Millie's Bridge to Chicago Street, with the intersection at Ames Ave being like one of the critical points. So one of the ideas that I had that I have not done much with, and we've just talked about here in the department and kind of kicked around ideas of, is what if we just looked at the core area and just looked at small scale dune restoration in that area? And that could be the foundation, and then over time build it west, build it east, to develop the full plan that was contemplated in the CRP. But you know, hit the core area first, so that we can protect the bridge, the corner of the road, and the car park and the access there as it turns around to go down to, is it Macy's Lane or Macy's Avenue, where the new big car park has been kind of put in behind Millie's restaurant. So to protect that access point too. That would be the kind of focus that I would like. I've kind of sketched this out in a very rough way. I don't know how it would work, but what we need is, if we're going to look at a core area, to get engineers to come up with that proper design for something that would work for an artificial dune. And I'm going to say this out loud: an artificial dune with planted grass on it and minimal to very little sand to be placed on it. We've seen how nourishment sand can cause issues. But you know, that has to be designed correctly, and in order to be a robust system that can actually work. If it does need nourishment sand, so be it. But we just need that to be correctly designed.
And Vince, what would be a time frame starting from zero to get to an installation?
Good question. Need to take a design first. Need to have a funding source identified. But we could probably, I don't know if that's in the department budget or not, no idea if that's within our current capability.
But we'll setting aside funding.
Okay.
Just thinking about and setting aside the source of the sand, if or any other materials, you know, if we had to design it, permit it, and install it in the most expeditious manner, how long do you think that would take?
2 years and an easy road. Yeah, if everything went really smoothly and according to plan, 2 years to construction.
Okay, so that's worth keeping in mind.
Yep.
Jen?
Thank you, Mary. So on that, Vince, I'm wondering if it makes sense to make a recommendation on this Just Do It project from crack to essentially be, we recommend taking what we know is a larger project, chunking it out to the most essential pieces and advising the select board or the town to move as quickly as they can to secure an engineer to design plans for this area. And I would add on to that, that if we do that, we would also advise intermediate steps for protection. You know, honestly, being out there again this weekend and watching it, people were climbing over intact dunes in order to see the sunset because there was nowhere for other people to, you know, for people to stand because the parking lot doesn't exist and they couldn't get to the beach. Just ways to, can we get in there and be like, okay, we need to protect this area. We're going to hire a consultant to do it. And we're going to actively protect the areas that need to stay protected right now. I think recommendations like that might be great.
100% agree. Can I respond a bit, Mary?
Yes, go ahead, Vince, and then we'll go to
So-
you.
Yeah, so 100% agree with everything Jen is saying. We ran into some pretty interesting and pretty major problems where there was, the car park was closed, the access from Chicago Street down to the beach was closed, and the enormous and massive public backlash led to it being opened again to public access when it wasn't necessarily the right decision for the habitat, for the environment, but it was done so that people could access the beach. You know, this, and not to jump down the road too far, this kind of gets to some of the points Ian's made here before, to be honest. And it is on a later agenda item. So it's how do you get that balance of doing the environmental protection, getting an engineered structure to protect the beach and keeping public access. That's the fine balance.
Thank you, Vince. Ian?
Thank you, Mary. So when Vince, you said that it would take up to 2 years, and I'm certainly not trying to second guess you when it comes to, let's say, a full array to defend that area. But we do have in front of Concom applications from private parties for both Quar tubes and Wilkinson arrays, as they're called, which is sort of a sisal matting that has beach grass and is filled with sand and has beach grass and is anchored. And I'm not saying that the Conservation Commission might approve under normal circumstances because it's such a dynamic environment, but I think if it was an emergency application from the town, that, you know, that might well be taken into account in the short term. So I do think that if necessary, we could probably muster the resources, but correct me if you think I'm wrong, Vince, to be able to protect it over the winter if the town wanted to spend that sort of money and if it met with the approval of the Conservation Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian, for volunteering. I was going to call on you for your perspective from Concom. Vince?
Yeah, if there's a lot of points in there, Ian's quite right. If we did the emergency application, it comes down to, this sounds horrible to say, resource management. We're how many people do you need to manage projects? Lots more than just me. That's the short answer. I can try and do as much as I can, but I still have all my existing projects as well as all the new ones that are constantly cropping up. I'd love to make this a priority because this has been an area that's been bugging me for as long as I've been in this job, 3+ years. This needs more attention. Madikit needs more attention. This intersection needs more attention. But when we don't have enough project managers, I just don't know how to accomplish that. One way to do it might be to get a contract and farm it out to a consulting firm to just get them to do it and get them to take it over. But that does require a proper budget article that would have to be approved, say, I don't know, next town meeting.
Thank you, Vince. Joe, did you have a comment you wanted to add?
Well, I just was wondering, does it, I mean, I don't know what it is. So it sounds like that what Vince needs is a design and then he should go before the Concom, but I agree with Ian. Is there a way to at least get some understanding from the Concom how they would vote on this type of project? Because
I
think
am going
the
to
sooner you
just
get-
straight out refuse to do a quid pro quo of any description with Concom.
Yeah,
I'm going to just wait
okay.
and do an application and do it the proper way.
Yeah, okay. All right. Just was just trying to then you could go get the budgeting for the whole entire project. Just trying to, because the Concom approval is good for 3 years, but just trying to get something moving is my recommendation.
Yeah, Ian?
And building on what Joe is saying, wouldn't it be something that the DPW could handle, Vince? I mean, it's right up their bailiwick, isn't it?
I agree. They're trying to work their way out of their own problems as well at the moment. I'm not trying to just hoist my projects onto others, and I'm happy to try and see if somebody else is willing to take it on. But yeah, totally possible. Absolutely, Ian.
Okay, any further thoughts on what we might recommend to the select board as concrete steps to take to support the design thinking workshop, Just Do It goals? No, I think we had a lot of good suggestions.
I just took it off screen, but
That's all right, Vince. I don't think you need to share it. All right, so moving on to the next item on the agenda, discussion of checklist for evaluating coastal projects for resilience. This is an ongoing discussion we've been having, and Vince has some notes from a conversation with Joanna. So we can review those and just as a starting point for discussion.
so I'm just going to go through this kind of quickly and briefly. It was in the packet. Hopefully everyone got a chance to look at it. I had a terrific conversation with Joanna. We basically put the outline of this together in about 45 minutes, and I just tidied it up a little bit, and she was happy with it, so it made it into the packet. So there was a handful of things that Joanna had brought to it that I hadn't even thought about, such as ADA accessibility. So that's one of the big parts, and it's why in certain parts of this you see the reference to ramps instead of stairs. So that's why that's in there. So one of the things that Joanna was also pointing out was to make sure we can identify every pre-1978 structure to be protected, basically along the whole area that we're talking about, from Dionis to Eel Point, effectively. It could be expanded although further than that, but identify the pre-78 structures would be one of the major starting points to see, well, what's the inventory of that? Where are they? What do they need to be protected now or in the future? And get an early understanding of that. This is something that we had a bit of trouble with, and thought that committee discussion would be very, very valuable. And it's a shame Matt Fee isn't here, because this is one of the things he's always had very good input on, is what is a passable beach? What is an acceptable width of sand or dry sand, or amount of the tide time that you can pass by? Should there be a set width? I don't know. This should be something really for committee discussion. And then what happens with the loss of walkable beach, and setting a trigger point for how alternative access might be required or put in there. This is the next part, is about ramps. Joanna very much wanted to talk about directional signage to make sure that it doesn't look like a private ramp or private access, that it actually says things like it is public access. This is a public path. It is a public way, and has the correct either easements or ownerships already built in and arranged that we can get in there. Annual maintenance might also be a part of it. And when we looked at this, we're thinking, how do we make sure that this actually happens? And we were looking at, well, we can't make them do a permit because it's public access, but what we can do is potentially make them report annually on the public access to make sure that private property owners who get a permit for this are upholding what they're supposed to do. And then, I don't know, Concom or Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee could review those kind of things and make sure that they're being lived up to, and make sure that the permits are being followed. And that will be part of the annual report. So that's about the essence of it. Anything I missed, Joanna?
Nope.
Comments, Gary and then Peter?
So I'm a little confused about this because we don't, when Vince said that we can't necessarily make people do something, we have no regulatory power whatsoever. We can't make anyone do anything. So to me, if you have these issues, it's the Concom that ought to be, the Concom has the regulatory authority to require stuff, to say, no, you can't do this. All we can do is come up with this list that Vince and Joanna were working on, and then give it to the Concom and say, now do your job. Because we have no regulatory authority whatsoever. So it's not as if we can put these rules in effect and people will have to follow them. We never get a chance to vote on those. We have no regulatory authority. But Concom, that's what they do every day, or at least every week or every month or whenever they meet. And therefore, all we should be doing, in my view, is come up with these conclusions or recommendations and give them to Concom and say, okay, now do your job.
Well, I think the other avenue would be a town bylaw. But you're right, we can only make a recommendation to another body that they adopt our recommendation or that they do something. Let's go to Ian for Concom and then to Peter.
Thank you, Mary. So Gary, we could actually piggyback, I believe, and please, Mary, correct me if I'm wrong, we could piggyback on a letter that the Concom wrote to the Mass Waterways who handle Chapter 91 issues, trying to put pressure on them to actually come down and examine some of the Chapter 91 licensed bulkheads that are clearly out of compliance, which is something that Rachel brought up last month. And first of all, I'd like to thank Vince and Joanne for doing, Joanna, for doing such a wonderful job. I mean, I can't wait to share this with my fellow Conservation Commission commissioners. But the one thing in terms of the passable beach, basically, the Chapter 91 license only applies between the mean high and low tide mark. So it's sort of, it's a moot point. Less than being ankle deep it's strictly to where the line has been drawn in the most recent survey. I'm absolutely for making them ADA accessible, and in fact, the property that really triggered all this in 18 Washing Pond Road, I met with Mickey Rowland and Brenda McDonough from the Commission on Disability in June, and they came out and had a look at it. They suggested I write to the Architectural Design Board, which I did, and I never heard back from them. So I don't know what the next step would be, but clearly this is something that if we could get the state body involved in that, I think it brings further pressure on what should be the public's right, including those who need to use a beach wheelchair to be able to access the beach between high and low tide. And the idea of a sign, I think, is a great idea. And for the annual maintenance, normally, I think we would need to take pictures both in summer and winter because of the variation. But I think this is an excellent blueprint, and thank you very much for your effort in this.
Thank you, Ian. We'll go to Peter.
Yeah, I had another comment, but then what Gary said about us being an advisory board, that's 100% true. But I would say, as advisory boards go within the town, we definitely have the select board's ear and the Concom's ear. they're watching what we're doing, and when we come up with something valid that says we need to get this done, I think it's going to get done. So we shouldn't feel so meek, even though we're an advisory board. And then I wanted to say, Vincent mentioned Dionis, so we only talking about Dionis, or we talking about the rest of the island for accessibility over coastal engineering structures. We could look to the Concom for their orders of conditions for the various structures in terms of access, to use an infamous example, the geotubes, the original permit said, and the Wisconsin Beach Preservation Fund committed to it, access over the geotubes with a ramp going up the sand and up and over. And the last time I was guiding on that beach, the ramp was so steep that even a very healthy, strong person couldn't make it up that ramp. So that's a thing right there. Anyway.
Thank you, Peter. Rachel, and then Ian.
Thank you, Mary. I am completely 150% supportive of accessibility. We work to achieve it in all of our projects. I'm also intimately familiar with the AAB regulations regarding all sorts of public open spaces. And I would just recommend that prior to requiring that anything be fully ADA accessible, everyone become intimately familiar with those recommendations and think about the reality of being able to implement and achieve that and what it's actually going to look like. Because some of the, just to give you, like an example, it's a 5% slope in a lot of places, which is and you can't exceed it. So it's a hugely long run in some locations, and depending on what you're, like a sidewalk, it's 2% change, and you cannot exceed a 2% change. So and that would be really challenging from a project standpoint, just a project design standpoint. And, we are dealing with this currently at our dock at 48 South Cambridge. That's completely ADA accessible, but we definitely made use of the existing topography that's there in order to achieve that. So I would just highly recommend that everyone completely review the ADA rule book and think about how that would actually be implemented in projects.
Thank you, Rachel. Ian?
Well, thank you, Rachel. I absolutely, that really wasn't quite on my radar. The other thing is, Vince, did you just get the letter I sent you that I promised to send you 2 weeks ago and forgot? But can you share that on the screen, or could you forward it to everybody else on Crack? The letter that Jeff sent on Concom's behalf.
So Mary, if you don't mind, Ian just sent it to me. I have the ready to share. If nobody minds, it's not been part of the agenda. It's not part of the packet.
We'll include it in the minutes. If it's germane to this discussion, I don't have a problem sharing it.
No problem. Ian, just guide me to the part you want.
Oh, Vince, it's more the question, sort of, I think your and Joanna's notes sort of back up part of the letter. And so maybe just for commissioners, for our Crack members to read before we come back to this would be fine. It's basically asking them to weigh in. We're trying to get them to come down and actually do an inspection. But my understanding is that they employ less than 12 people for an 850-mile coastline. And so it takes, an act of God to get them to see anything. So hopefully we'll have, enough projects, enough bulkheads that are out of compliance to finally get them down here to have a look and make a report accordingly. Because as unfortunate as I think I've said before, it's not strictly within the Conservation Commission's purview. So Chapter 91 licensing is strictly a state mandate, an individual, it's a different division from enforcing our state and local wetland regulations. So, and that brings me up to another subject, because hopefully we can use this to fine tune our local regulations. And I believe on August 23rd, I sent Vince our latest rough draft, Concom's latest rough draft of our local regulations. And if you haven't forwarded them yet, Vince, could you do that, please? So that everybody can have a look and decide whether they'd like to weigh in to the Concom when there's a public meeting, or get in touch with Jeff accordingly.
Sure. I don't know that I've forwarded it. I'll check, and if I haven't, I will.
That'd be
And
great. Thank
yeah,
you.
and I'll forward this letter as well to all committee members, and I'll make this letter once I get the minutes. I'll make this part of the minutes as well.
Great.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vince. Jen?
Thank you, Mary. This is a really interesting conversation, and I like the direction that we're going in, as far as if there are recommendations that we're making. I think it makes sense that they're going through the Concom as potentially in addition to what the Concom's regulations are when it comes to coastal engineering structures. That seems like the likely body to handle this. Some of the questions I have, I mean, just thinking about it, I'm assuming there wouldn't be a lot of structures that or don't already have this protection in place that could still get it. So I assume we're talking about coastal engineering structures that have already been, that have not been constructed yet. Because going backwards and looking at a coastal engineering structure that's in place that you're attempting to add passage over, you can't do that on neighboring properties. And the majority of structures that have been already put in place cover most likely the length of that particular property. So we would be having to ask these structures to alter their degree of protection by pulling in this access so that it's only impacting their properties. You know, you wouldn't want to put a ramp across your neighbor's property. That wouldn't be permissible. So I'm just trying to envision what the practicality is of how we're thinking that this regulation and passage would go forward if we're thinking about, you know, structures that are already in place. And maybe that's a discussion you had, you know, I missed the last meeting, so I apologize if that's bringing up stuff that's happened before, but I'm just trying to envision how this would actually function.
So before we go to Ian and Vince, one of the thoughts that I've had is that we might need to start doing case studies where we look at a specific structure or a hypothetical structure and apply some of our thinking and sort of discover those real world practicalities. So for instance, if there's a bulkhead that the town owns that we could use as a case study for some of these, that might be helpful. The other thing I wanted to bring up is that the Roads and Right-of-Way Committee has had Chapter 91 enforcement on their agenda for quite some time. I'm not following that committee actively, so I don't know what progress they've made, but I think they were brought up before as a potential liaison for this topic. So that's what I wanted to add. Joe?
Thank you, Mary. So I didn't know if there was some, to Ian, I didn't know if there was some way that we could do like a video presentation or be on site FaceTiming with the people about the Chapter 91. You know, some way, this is not their first rodeo. They must have come across this in other communities and towns. So I don't think anything's unique, just, but is there a way to get them activated with the beauty of today of having Zoom available? You know, is there some way we could get them, you know, not coming to Nantucket, but viewing Nantucket from afar, whether it's a drone or something, but there has to be some way that they've experienced these issues and have guidelines or some recommendations that would help guide us from today moving forward. And then I think if someone did come on, then we could do a on-site meeting to really kind of vet out some of the issues site by site, you know, each individually. So that's kind of something I would look into.
Wouldn't that be something for Concom to do again, not necessarily Coastal?
Yeah, I mean, anyway, just get them started, you know. I like Vince, like Ian said, there's only 12 members. But is there a way to, use modern technology and get them here? And like I said, this can't be the first, beach problem that they've experienced. It's got to be some along the coast of Massachusetts where they've had this issue, or some other community, and they said this is dealt this way, and we're going to use this practice. I mean, you wisely went to Falmouth and went on their site and said this is brilliant, let's use this. So I think the same could be used on Nantucket from prior experiences from any state that has a coastline. So
Thank you, Joe. Let's go to Rachel.
Thank you, Mary. This is something that I just have a lot of experience in, and I do think it is possible to do some retrofits. I had told Vince that I would provide him with contact information, and if it's not going to Vince, perhaps it's going to Ian. So I'd love to know who I can provide contact information to, because I work a lot with DEP and Chapter 91. And Carlos Fragata did actually come down to Nantucket, just so you know, to visit. We did about 6 site visits with him about 2 years ago to look at various docks we were building. I do think it is possible to retrofit, and in terms of doing case studies to discover world practicalities, I live in that case study, so I'm happy to share any information you want, because that's my life. So
Cool.
thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Vince, did you have something you wanted to add?
2 things now, if that's all right. Rachel mentioned about sharing contact info with either me or Ian. I would suggest both. Then just to get back to what Ian was saying earlier, he had sent me on August 23rd at 2:15 the codified regulations, the updated version 2, asked me to send it to CRAC members. I sent it about 45 minutes later that day. I can resend it to everyone if you want, just to bring it up your email lists again. I don't want to spam people though. Everyone okay with that?
I think we all look forward to your emails, Vince.
I'll resend it. So
Ian, you had a comment?
Yeah, so that'd be great, Rachel, if you could CC me on that. And so we found, for instance, thanks to Deanne Atherton digging out I should say the Nantucket Coastal Conservancy, finally getting a reply from the Mass Waterways. They now have, let me see, what is it called? They have a Storm Smart Properties Fact Sheet 7 Repair and Construction of Seawalls and Revetment webpage, which includes specifically when erosion results in no fronting beach at mean high tide, then the reconstruction or repair of the structure will require a license from the DEP Waterways Program that specifies how the property owner will maintain required public access. And so at Concom, this subject doesn't really come up when we ask about the license. We're told it's none of our business. And so when you're talking about roads and right of way of thankfully focusing on this, I got a request about 13 Commercial Street, a commercial wharf, which has been before us. We had no idea that they had applied for a Chapter 91 license. And my understanding is that there are many structures on Nantucket that don't have the Chapter 91 license that they should have. So it's a very incomplete list at best.
Thank you. And would you send the website you just mentioned to Vince so he can include that in the minutes and also share it with the other committee members?
I will, absolutely. And in fact, I'll ask Deanne if I can forward her correspondence. Otherwise, I'll just send the link.
We do have Deanne in the meeting. Deanne, if you want to weigh in on this, please go ahead and unmute, but you're not required to.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Ian. Yes, of course, forward the correspondence. We received this fact sheet from Julian Neisel, who has been a presenter here on Island and helped in the development of the coastal management plan some years ago. And I think you'll find it very informative. So I urge you all to read it. We didn't even know it existed, so we're glad we have it now. So thank you, Ian.
Oh, you're welcome. And if I may, Mary, Joe, thank you very much for weighing in on that. Those are great suggestions, and I'll bring them up with Jeff for the next meeting on Thursday.
Okay, further comments? All right, if we have Vince.
Sorry. So this set of recommendations that Joanna and I put together, and I made notes on screen on today. Do you want Joanna and I to revisit this and then bring it back for another CRAC meeting?
I'm not sure what the next steps are. We just had a lot of information thrown at us to review. So yeah, I don't know if it will be the next meeting, but this is definitely a continuing conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Ian?
Thank you, Mary, for your patience. I mean, what I would like to see is us to send a letter to Mass Waterways as an advisory committee, asking them, reinforcing what Concom has sent to them to build up the pressure to have them come down and really get this on their radar. And as Joe said, this can't be their first rodeo, because this has to be an issue that many communities are facing now.
Yeah, I think that's something that we can pursue. Do we want to have a motion to draft a letter to bring back to the committee for review? Are we at that point?
Can I just ask a question first?
Vince?
The purpose of the committee is to give advice to the select board. Would the if the committee is sending letters to state agencies, does that not have to be a recommendation first before select board?
So yes, I think you're right. So we would draft a letter and recommend that the select board send it on behalf of the town, I think would be the right procedure. Thank you, Vince. Ian?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Okay,
I'll
so we
second
have,
that.
that was Joe seconding. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, Gary Beller,
Aye.
Peter Brace,
Aye.
Rachel Freeman,
Aye.
Ian Golding,
Aye.
Jen Carberg,
Aye.
Joanna Roach,
Aye.
Joe Topham,
Aye.
and Mary Longacre, aye. Thank you. We have public comment as the next item on the agenda. Are there any members of the public that wish to offer a comment at this time? You can just go ahead and unmute. Deanne Atherton.
Mary, yes, it's Deanne again. Just 3 quick points, please. One is in regard to your discussion at Mattocket and the challenges at the end of Mattocket Road, I will, Vince, forward to you a plot plan that shows that there is town-owned land at the end of Mattocket Road where you turn right on Ames Avenue. And Tom Erickson, who was a former president of Smith's Point Association, had sent it to the Coastal Conservancy to indicate that it would be very easy, fairly simple to pull that turn back, making it more landward, and that the town already owns the land. So I will send you that plot plan so that you have it. Second, I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention that the WPI, Worcester Polytechnic Institute students, did a project some years ago where they compiled an interactive database of all the coastal erosion structures on Nantucket. And I don't know how current it is, but I will send it to you so that you have it. It's very helpful.
Thank you, Deanne. You said you had another item?
I have my third. Vince had his hand up, though I didn't know.
We'll let you finish before we
Okay.
want to respond to that as well.
The third thing I wanted to mention to you and was very relevant to your discussion, especially Johanna, when you were talking about, appropriations from town meeting for projects, and it takes a while for them to happen. And we went back to the coastal resilience plan and remembered that one of the primary recommendations is to have a sediment transport study. And as we know, town meeting appropriated $550,000 for that study in the spring. And it seems in rereading this section of the coastal resilience plan that such an island-wide study is necessary for any and all resilience projects on the island. So we just wondered what the status of that is, and is there anything we can do to be supportive of getting that study underway?
Right, Vince, you had some comments?
Yes, so I just wanted to ask Deanne a question if possible. The inventory of coastal resilience structures that was done by WPI students, was that the one 2 years ago? If so, I was the advisor on it, and I think I had WPI students presented to CRAC at the time. So that's in the record already. Then what was the other one? So the first question was about the corner of Ames. I know that piece of land. Yep. Then the second question was about the WPI. What was the third one, Deanne?
Sediment transport.
Sediment transport. Yeah, I discussed that. What was it, 2 weeks ago at a CRAC meeting? Because the same question came up then, or was it a month ago? I don't remember which. Yeah, we're actively writing the scope of services to try and get that contract out. It takes time.
Okay. Any further comment from members of the public at this time? All right, if there's none, the next item on our agenda, a new business committee and natural resources department reports. Deanne reminded me of the WPI students. We believe they have a project coming up for this fall that will focus on coastal resilience, and Vince is going to get more information about that. So just a side note that's not on the agenda. There are events scheduled for Climate Change Awareness Month. Acclimate has a calendar on their website. The Conservation Foundation, in cooperation with the Linda Loring Foundation, are doing a lecture series. Jen, do you have any feedback for us on how the September 8th event was?
Thank you, Mary. Yeah, for advertising it just a week ahead of time, we had a really great turnout. We had a lot of people that came, and it was a really good interaction. It was a lot of people we actually hadn't seen before at events, and people that actually didn't have much knowledge about what the CRP was. So we brought that up when we gave introductions. So that was it was a really good connection to the public, and hopefully we'll get a good turnout the next 2 weeks as well. So it's this week. Sarah's talking about her research, and then next week I'll be talking about our coastal resiliency research.
Great. The NPNEDC will have a presentation, and there's a typo in the agenda. It's Liz Durkee. There's not an S on the end of her name. The Martha's Vineyard Commission, which is the regional planning agency equivalent of the NPNEDC for the vineyard, recently completed and released a climate action plan. And so NPNEDC is asking Liz to do a brief presentation on that at their meeting next Monday at 5 o'clock, which will be on Zoom. And Remain and the Conservation Foundation are doing a book club and discussion. I don't know if there are still free copies of that book available. You can check with Remain. They were giving some away. Other updates from committee members or from Vince? Peter?
Okay. I think this is a little bit way out, but at the Harbor and Shellfish Advisory Board's last meeting, which was September 6th, we had a presentation from a group called ACRATS. You guys probably all know it as Nantucketers Against Turbines. And they're coming late to the game to protest Vineyard Wind, which has largely been permitted. And they are trying to convince the Harbor and Shellfish Advisory Board that the wind turbines are bad, and they pull out all the stuff that says that they're bad. I tried to remind them that the wind turbines are being proposed for an area that's outside of our jurisdiction in federal waters, so we really have no say in it, but they persisted. And one of the things that they presented to us was that the installation of the wind turbines is going to stir up a lot of sand, which is going to then flow into Nantucket Harbor and cause us any number of problems. I don't have the data to support that. It sounds crazy to me, but I just thought that's what these people are telling groups that they're trying to convince to try and, trying to get this blocked. So just wanted to report that.
Do they also think that the world is flat?
Those
Let's
thoughts
avoid-
cross my mind, Ian.
Let's avoid personal attacks, please.
Yes, we're in a public venue and I have my own thoughts about that organization. I am a supporter of wind turbines. And definitely can't talk like that in a public venue. So
I apologize to the public and to the.
it's
chair.
all right. Anyway, I'll talk to you privately. You come by the market on Saturday and we can talk.
We'll do so.
Okay.
Any further comments from committee members? Joe?
Again, like Peter, it's a little outside of our latitude, but last night at the planning board, there was a project of someone trying to break off a piece of their land, and that one of the issues was that I had was that there were 3 town trees on the property, but no one knew that they were town trees. So what I am asking is everyone to reach out to the CPC members to or someone to find some way to get funding to the tree committee so that all the town trees could be labeled, tagged, and then brought onto the GIS mapping so that everyone knows where they're at. It's really not part of our purview, but I do think that this is an important issue for the town because, I mean, 3 town trees on one lot is impressive to have them all there. But I think there was an issue early June at 10 York Street where there was a town tree cut, but no one knew. So I think that's something, if you guys can work the line, so to speak, and get this moving, that'd be great. Thank you.
So I was also at the planning board meeting and Vince had given me a couple of pointers about how trees are a positive for coastal resilience, which I was able to include in the discussion. And I'm also a former member of the Tree Advisory Committee, so I have some familiarity with the existence and need for protection of town trees. So I spoke on that as well. Vince, you had a comment?
Yeah, a minor one. This is totally outside of anything else. I'm an ecologist. I love trees. I can talk about trees all day. I was part of an attempt at this survey once, and then I think about, was it last year, 2 years ago, WPI students came again and they went off and mapped a whole bunch of town trees and tried to create an app to identify town trees. So that's out there, Joe. I don't know if they covered every town tree, or I know they were mainly focusing on Main Street in the core downtown area. I don't know how far they expanded it in the end, but there's certainly a good starting point for you there with the WPI project.
Yep, Madam Chair.
There have been, I'm sorry, Joe, there have been any number of starts on getting a tree inventory, and what we really need is a finish.
Yeah, so Madam Chair, I don't know if I'm gonna use the shampoos, Dave Shampoo is aware of that. If he is, that's great, but it didn't sound like last night that he was aware of. They have a list, but it's not really finalized. So anyway, we can kind of push this over the end zone would be great.
Ian?
Well, I couldn't agree more, but I think for CPC funding, you have to have a group formally apply. So, the question is who would apply? Because I think that would be a good source to get the resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Joe, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just one last comment. So when the issue came up at the select board meeting in June, I reached out to the town manager and said, is there any way you could speak to Ken Bovegran and start the application process back in June? Because I think that last week, Ian, correct me if I'm wrong, or whoever's on the CPC, that last week was the deadline. So, I was trying to get it moving as fast as possible, but I believe that there is some wiggle room within open space under the CPC guidelines so that could be done. So, yeah, that's what I was trying to do. Thank you.
I'll bring it up with Mark Beal, who's our representative. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, further updates, comments from committee members? Right, if there are none, our next meeting date is September 27th, and we can take a motion to adjourn.
So move, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Joe. Do we have a second?
Second,
Thank you, Joanna. Roll call vote, Gary Beller,
Aye.
Peter Brace,
Aye.
Rachel Freeman,
Aye.
Ian Golding,
Aye.
Jen Carver,
Aye.
Joanna Roach,
aye.
Joe Topham,
Aye.
and Mary Longacre. Aye. Thank you all.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers, everyone. Okay, I'm just going to stop the recording there, Mary.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Really, absolutely. I hope you've had your cigar, and I don't know if you've got a name yet, but marvelous news.
Cheers, appreciate that.